Hello, everyone. Welcome in 2025 for our first inaugural for this year discussion of Innovative Universities Global Webinar Series, where we discuss universities that are or could be the future of higher education. It's 15 minutes or 20 minutes presentation followed by the discussion. We are going to publish the webinar recordings every Saturday on YouTube. The team is still everybody you know and met here. Isaac is my co-host. My name is Dara Melnik. Our steering committee help us to define new cases and new horizons for exploration of innovative and experimental higher education. And last but not least, our support team is headed by Alexandra Martichuk, and Zainab Tan is our student assistant. We are particularly lucky to be beginning the year with a case of a reform university, one of the several in Denmark and one of the representations of a wider European and maybe worldwide process that was unfolding in the 60s and 70s. Isaac, I'll give you the floor now to present Hannah.
Hello, everyone, and I'm very happy to be with you today in 2025 from Constructor University. And indeed, we are very lucky to have Professor Hanne Andersen with us. She's the rector of Roskilde University. I hope I pronounce it correctly. And Hanne is an expert in higher education. She is a professor of university pedagogy, and she worked in some leading Danish universities, including Aarhus University, and she led learning lab, I guess it was called, at Copenhagen Business School. And the aim of this lab was to improve higher education, improve teaching process. Anna is still publishing a lot of interesting articles. I'm particularly impressed with the article on 2022, Current Tensions in Higher Education. We probably return to this topic later. But now I would like to give floor to Professor Andersen, Rector Andersen, and she will tell us a bit about the university, and then we'll start to talk about that. Anna, please, the control is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be with you and to have the occasion to discuss universities in the future. And beginning by Roskilde University, where I've been the rector for 10 years, and where we work with new methods of teaching and learning and try to keep up with being innovative. So I think the discussion can be very interesting for all of us. Roskilde University was founded in 1972, so it's really a type of these reform universities. It was, I'll give you some facts and then present to you what were the ideas, how we're working with it, what does Roskilde University look like today, and how are we working with staying innovative and progressive as a university. Roskilde University was founded in 1972 as a university center, which means that it was founded to not only be a university with university education, but also professional education, like teacher education. That was unfortunately abandoned. Now we are a full university and not trying to grasp all the fields at once, and because no Danish universities do that. It's quite common in Norway and Sweden, but not in Denmark. We have about 7,500 students, about 500 researchers, 180 plus PhD students, and in total, with people taking care of the gardens and the labs and everything, we are about 900 employed at Roskilde University. The campus is one campus, one green campus with a lot of buildings, as you saw in the first slide, with a lake and quite a beautiful environment. Next to it, we have got the city of Roskilde. And it's about 30 kilometers from Copenhagen, and I have to say that about 75% of our students live in Copenhagen. But our students come from the whole island of Zealand, mostly from the north of Copenhagen and Copenhagen, but also from Fionia, the island in the middle of Denmark, and Jutland, the big island bridging to Germany. We have only 4 big bachelor programs, and 3 of them also exist in English language. They are all interdisciplinary programs where you start with basic studies in one main field like humanities, social sciences, sciences, and humanities and technology. So there are these 4 programs. 3 of them, the 3 first ones, also exist in English with a lot of international students. The idea is that you start with projects, interdisciplinary projects, and half of the time you work with projects. I come back to the method as such, but the important thing is that you really start broad and that you work together with all the different disciplines in that main field, and then you specialize in 1 or 2 areas. We also have about 30 interdisciplinary master programs. We used to have a combination structure where you could freely combine 2 themes. We have decided, because of the need to go very fast into the labor market in Denmark, that's a law, that's something we must do. We have to have more precise profiles for our students, but those profiles are still interdisciplinary. We have also 8 professional master programs for lifelong learning, people who pay to come and take a part-time education. So these are just some facts, not about the structure of the departments, but the structure of the education. The history.
May I ask
Yes.
just factual question?
Yes, you're so welcome.
So these 4 programs, it's a small number, so you can just tell us what are these programs. And what does it mean that they have English programs? So it means that these programs are offered both in Danish and English?
Yeah, in the beginning, Roskilde University had an approach that would say that the language would depend on the groups, because there was only group work. So it was really open and international. Now we have established, in accordance with the University Act, that the programs are either in English or in Danish. When they are in Danish, of course, there can occur other languages, and that happens also in the English, but it's English speaking programs, and they are not exactly the same. For example, in the humanities, we have this Danish spoken broad humanities program, but the other program in English is called Global Humanities. So it does explicitly change the curriculum. And of course, the same happens in the social sciences, that when you have students from all over the world, the curriculum is more open. But we try to open the curriculum also in the Danish programs, of course. We have, one of our ideals is to be to have this openness towards the world. And also, of course, in sciences, in natural sciences, there is also a need for that, because when you work in a problem-oriented way, you need to be open to problems that are not only local, but also global.
But what are these 4 programs? So humanities?
Social sciences.
Social sciences.
Natural sciences, and humanities and technology.
Humanities and technology.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then the 3 of them, the 3 first, humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences, exist in English as parallel programs.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Super.
you. I understand.
And we are really appreciating and working to be an innovative and progressive university, living on the traditions of 72 and the 70s, but also changing a lot from that because times are different. But what we really believe in is that we are founded to challenge academic traditions and experiment with new ways to create and acquire knowledge. That's our mission, and that is still our mission. We also strive to establish and to continue to have an innovative pedagogy, to have engaged student, even with students of today who may be more formed from the high school to look for good grades and showing what they can do instead of perhaps sometimes engaging. That's societal development, and it's still very important. And also the critical theory that was also part of the foundation, but the critical thinking is very much a part of our approach, and the progressive way of addressing research and collaboration with our environment, with our local partners. So we try to be, and we have been, a pioneering university in Denmark for new pedagogy at the national level. For high schools, for example, that introduced a lot of project work and a lot of interdisciplinarity, and also other universities, as you said. So the university in 72 and in the 70s introduced new working forms, project work, and what the Minister of Education at that time said, and I've had lots of discussions with her, it was Rit Bjerregaard, very famous minister, and she said, I defended Roskilde because it was very criticized in the 70s. I defended Roskilde not for the sake of Roskilde, but for the sake of the other universities, because they needed somebody to bite their legs.
But what academic traditions you challenged?
The lectures, the professors, the authorities, the how do you say, ivory tower, the fact that you don't need the others outside university, the look at other educations as not as strong or good. Roskilde from the beginning was working a lot with workers and with developing practice skills, which is something that our minister today is our minister, not the Minister of Research, but of Education, of Teaching, is very occupied by. And I think sometimes Denmark doesn't see how strong Roskilde is on these traditions and how much you can collect from that, seeing that each of the 8 Danish universities has strengths and can contribute to the society and to the policies that politicians have. We are sometimes looked upon as still a Marxist universities from the 70s, which is no longer the truth. But we're an engaged university with a lot of innovation and a lot of knowledge about education in the whole society from the researchers that founded this university. And we build on the traditions, but we do it in new ways. And in order to be updated and to still build on these strong traditions, we have established a new strategy some years ago that we call Strategy Roskilde University. And we still use a C in our abbreviation, which comes from center, because RUC is a well-known label in Denmark for the good and for, as I said, the 70s. But we use both sides of the coin. 2030, and we call it interconnected. It's still extremely important to be connected at the university with our students and professors together, administration and professors and students, and also with the outside world and internationally. So that's what our strategy is called. And we are going for explicitly more interdisciplinary research, because you can build on many kinds of research, but we wish to be known for our interdisciplinary research, cutting edge interdisciplinary research, which we all know is a challenge, because research is very often more facilitated. Even if we talk so much about interdisciplinary research, it's easier to publish in the disciplines still. We also want to be known still for our problem-oriented and mission-driven education, important education, not just short relevance, but long-time relevance, critically important education. Environmental, economic, and social sustainability, and we want to be a co-creator of societal change. Just to tell you that these are our 4 titles of our strategy to work with a university that wishes to keep the development, because you cannot be innovative on only what you did or what you were founded as. I also wanted to, before I come to the question, to just present some of the areas of research and education for which we are mostly known. We're very well known in Denmark for communication and humanities, for media studies, urban development, citizen engagement, culture and diversity in the workplace, and very much for our journalism, also communication journalism. Society and technology, we study leadership, governance and strategy, politics and management, digital technologies, digital transformation in organizations is something that we also very serious in and working in our both research and education. And then environment and transition, environmental biology, energy transition, circular economy, sustainable development of companies and sectors, food systems, behavior related to green transition, and finally health research in a very broad sense. We don't educate doctors but we do educate nurses to a master's level. And we do digital welfare technologies, molecular medicine, mathematical modeling of diseases. We are very strong in mathematical modeling, and patient encounters with the healthcare system, and everything that is about preventing what would you say?
Diseases,
diseases
disease.
in any kind. So that it's about the social life also and the good life. So that was just to cover a little bit, also not to only talk about structure, but also talk about what are the areas we're working with. But then the problem-oriented project work and project learning, the PPL. In every semester we have, it can be other ECTSs actually, but we work with 50% of each. Always in a whole education, there's always 50% of project work. That's very important in order to keep it, because once you change that a lot, I think it's difficult to keep it, because we all want courses where we can be sure that we present our research and to let students actually work independently with supervision, of course, is setting them free, but is also it's also losing control. That is, I think, any teachers and any researchers feeling in that kind of teaching, in that method. So we do a lot in order to train our teachers and train our students, train our international students who come and who are not used to working in that independent way. Because it's always, every semester, there is a problem formulation seminar with a group formation. We spend 2 or 3 days doing that. That's very much student involvement, and where students really decide what they want to work with. So that's kind of a response, but I will continue the response to our audience. The problem formulation seminar can take between 2 and 3 days. The norms, the time norms for our researchers are not the same as in the 70s and the 80s, but we really stick to it. And then always we have a midterm seminar. Of course, there's supervision and there are group meetings and they work very independently with the supervisor. But in the middle of the semester, they always have a peer feedback session where they give, 2 groups give each other feedback. And the supervisor from the other group also gives feedback to the other group, or to the first group. But this is a very important thing to learn to give feedback, to learn to receive feedback. And also at the end of the semester, there's always an oral group exam with both the supervisor and an external examiner, so that they can actually oversee what goes on in these 2 or 3 hours time with this exam, where they present the students present the project, and they get feedback, and they also get very often a grade in Denmark, we have grades, or we have passed or not passed. And it depends on each program how it is. But important for us is that each semester you get feedback. It's formative feedback for your next project work, so that over the 6 semesters of the bachelor's program and the 4 semesters of the master's program, you actually develop the method to work together with others, to be able to take the challenges of other people being different, of having other opinions, of having other disciplines, perhaps, and other wishes. You need to learn to listen to them. You need to learn to argument. You need to learn to be able to formulate your ideas yourself. So very important for our method. And then we actually...
Sorry, Hannah, just again to clarify, not conceptual question here. So could you just give, if you remember, a couple of examples of the problems, just to for understanding what we are dealing with?
You can work with, for example, with biking in Copenhagen, and the challenges there are at these days due to the electric bikes or something like that. But formulated from your everyday life or from politics. It could be a political question of a political party having trouble, or the challenge of some environmental ideas that haven't been applied. It could be very locally, nationally, or internationally. But it can be many different things. Of course, it has to be something, and that's where I will take the next slide. It has to be exemplary. Oh, sorry, just one. Exemplarity means that you should be able to explore an issue in depth without losing the broader perspective. You must understand and be able to explain how a specific issue relates to more general questions within the field. Exemplarity of the problem for what the learning goals are in the program. This is very much both the students but also the supervisors' work. And this is also being done during the project formation phase. But of course, the problem is being developed all through the semester in the group. So the problems can be really many, but they need to have a relevance for the program, and they need to have a relevance for the methods. We put a lot of effort and a lot of pressure, or we stress very strongly the methodological side of our learning and teaching, because we do not guarantee that you go through all the curriculum. When you give the students this role to work in projects half of the time, 50% of the time in a program, then you cannot guarantee a curriculum. We have read this and this and this and this. It is exemplarity, the principle of exemplarity, that they go in depth with the problems. And in that way, they learn much more about how to tackle a problem, how to go through the methods and use the methods. It's a very scientific method. And that's what we always also say, that it is a method that works with the same methods as the researchers. And here we have presented the 7 principles also for the students to know that when they start, it's not just group work. You do not just sit together in a circle discussing things for a semester. You actually work with pedagogical principles, research principles. And those are, as I said, exemplarity is very important for the choice of the problems. But the fact that you work in projects, formulate problems, investigate them, etc. I'll not go through all that, but just say that these are the principles. Project work, the fact that it's problem-oriented, the fact that in that way it's interdisciplinary, that it has, and here comes the answer back to the participants, we actually call it participant control. The participants are responsible, but together with their supervisor, for the project work. And we often in pedagogy, you say that participants in project work are in front of the supervisor, whereas in the teaching, in the coursework where the researchers do the teaching, they are in front. So we have a combination of these two in our balance. Whereas the old Roskilde University had only project work, and they could ask the researchers to do courses for them, to do lectures for them when they needed it. So everything was decided around the projects. Now we have 50% of each. So we have two different pedagogical methods working. But we say that even in the coursework, we try to make students responsible and critical and not afraid of asking questions. But again, as I said, there is a tendency for students to be a little bit afraid of showing that they don't know something. They might not get a good grade. That comes from high school, but it is taken over by the universities, and we do a lot to try to avoid that. The 6th and the 7th are group work and international insight and vision. Those are our principles of PPL. And then because of the work market, which is so important today for our government and for everyone, we also have shown how the skills of PPL are skills for working life. So as you can see, we say, okay, if you do project work and if you have international vision, for example, 1+6 group work, then you can create clarity in the team, draw on the strengths of your team members, and ensure that everyone has a voice. So you get to be more aware of the competencies that you get from studying at a university with PPL, like Roskilde University. So we're trying to train our students to know that, yes, you can't show the same pages of curriculum, but you can show competencies, which are very much the competencies of what we call 21st century skills. It's very much that we're going through. And I found a student in a journal, in a Danish, journal for women, where she apparently studying journalism was doing an internship. So she wrote actually 11 things that she had learned from studying at RUC, and I've taken just 3 of them to show that students, at least sometimes, but I have the feeling that they're quite happy with this project work, but also frustrated during the project work. And I think frustration is part of learning. But here is what she said. I've learned how to put together a bachelor thesis multiplied by 8, because yes, every single project assignment ends up being so long that it might as well be a thesis. I have learned the art of collaboration. Project writing is many things, but it's not always a bed of roses. I've learned to keep my cool, share my opinions, positive and negative, and make up the best of a pressured situation. I've learned how privileged you are as a student, because even though Christmas time is busy and May is busy, there are a lot of benefits to studying at RUC. You can also often plan your studies the way you want them to be into your daily life, and you can try internship and exchanges. So I think she takes out, just by 3 of those, very important things for me as an educator and as responsible for education of a specific kind, that it's hard for the students. It's difficult to form the groups. It's hard to formulate the problems. It is a lot of struggle during the semester. And at the end of the semester, you work really hard. That's May and Christmas, because you have to finish the thesis. But as she says, and as I've heard many of our alumni say also, it gives you a strength on the work market. It gives you a strength to lead projects. Because as another one said, another one of my colleagues from a think tank in Copenhagen, she said, I have learned from RUC that however things look, how stressed and difficult it looks when you start on a big project, I know from the group work at Roskilde University that at the end of the semester, there is a report. We have done the work, we can do it. So this ability to work together with people who are different from you on a project that is not clear from the beginning, that is really a strength, and that's really a competence that our students get. The last thing I have 2 more things I'd like to stress, and the first one is just how do we work with our region? We work a lot with the region of Zealand that you could see here. We have actually projects focusing for example, on cities, societies, and cultures in the region of Zealand. I've just listed some questions that students have asked themselves in a 3-day stay in Rødbyhavn at the very south of not Zealand, but the islands south of Zealand, which is Lolland and Falster. In Rødbyhavn, we are building the Femern Belt link. At the Denmark and Germany is building that. It's the largest construction project in Danish history, and of course, it's interesting for students to study that. So, how does the city feel about the new residents? Are there new locations being utilized, and what are the tourism perspectives related to construction, etc., etc. And that's just an example back to what you asked, Isak. What can projects be about? Sometimes we take a bus and we go with the students, up to 70 students, to, for example, the southern islands of Zealand, and work together with organizations, institutions, for some days over a whole semester in order to help them discuss their projects, problems, and have students work with them, and then students present to them what they found out, either after 3 days or after a semester. And it could also be the thesis, the master's thesis that a student does together with the municipality, for example. We're very proud of that work. And it has shown to the island of Zealand that Roskilde University is not a university that is only turned inside towards its inside, but actually is interested in Zealand. I think it has been all the time, but we're doing it more systematically these days in order to be part of the island of Zealand, and of course also working a lot with Copenhagen. But we are part of so far the region of Zealand. And finally, the global network, the Critical Edge Alliance, has also been very important for us to establish. Established by good professors and students at Roskilde University over the last 8 years or so. Coming out of alliances we already had with other universities, but building them together with them. And I just wanted to start by showing who we are. We want to specifically be part of all parts of the world. And I'm not going to read all the names. I just wanted you to know who we are and then say, what is it we're doing? We are working with emancipatory and transformative education. It's a potential in education, and we need to really work with that. That is what education is about. It's deep thoughts of all times about what education is at a global level. So it's, if you look at what our research group and our people in that work together, the 8 universities have taken out. We've taken out that we build on Europe's Enlightenment periods, that students are independent and critical thinkers. That comes from the Enlightenment period. We build on North American liberal arts colleges. We build on new ways to enable students self-cultivation. That comes from liberal art colleges and Dewey, etc. We build on South American and Indian critical pedagogy, higher education that should serve democracy and social justice. And we build on the reform universities of the 60s and the 70s, interdisciplinary learning and research. And in that way, we have different focuses that I've also listed. Student-centered learning, SCL is student-centered learning, critical thinking, interdisciplinarity, and social engagement. And we try and we work a lot to have the students be a center of our alliance so that they can share experiences. They always participate. We have a yearly conference and they always participate. We tend to find resources for them to travel to the conference so that there can be lots of students and they work together during the conference. We have joint teaching and research projects, and we have staff exchange. It's not a very rich alliance, but it's full of energy, I would say, and I'm very proud of it, and I hope we can keep it up. We also part of a European Reform University Alliance, ERUA, and it was formed very much out of Critical Edge Alliance, SIA. Right now, we are only associated member. After 3 years of being a full member and a founder of ERUA, we are now, as Roskilde University, associate member. but very eager to work for the new ways of reform universities and such alliances. And we also do that in order to show what kind of a university we are, to show that to our national politicians and partners. So that was what I had chosen to show you of Roskilde University. I look very much forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very interesting. Dara,
So I
you
actually
we
want to
started.
come back to founding of the university in the early 70s. What were the main, you already listed the problems in university education that RUC was responding to and other university centers were meant to respond to. But what about opportunities? Which opportunities opened at the time that allowed this to happen?
I think one opportunity was simply the fact that there were more and more students, university students. It was the times, the 60s, universities were really growing, more and more students, more and more researchers. And in Denmark, both the universities of Copenhagen, University of Aarhus was founded in the 30s, University of Southern Denmark was founded in the 60s, and there was also the more professional schools, but there was a need for more at that time. So there was a discussion of just having another university, a fourth university, and I'm not mentioning here the business schools and the engineering schools. They were not yet universities at that time, they were professional. They were applied universities of applied science or schools of applied science. So there was a discussion of whether one should have a university in another part of Denmark or in Roskilde. But the fact that Copenhagen University was growing so fast, it was also just to take some of the students from Copenhagen University. So actually in the beginning, it was full of normal disciplines. But the rector they chose, who was a politician, he was very inspired by the American universities this new approach of reform universities and of new approaches to learn and teach, like McMaster in Canada, but also the other American universities. And that was how the method of McMaster was applied to this university. And then there was very much that critical approach and political engagement, and it happened to all the Danish universities, but Roskilde became maybe not the center, because Copenhagen was also very strong.
The embodiment.
But some kind of embodiment, also in history, and also because of the difficulties they had. They actually got an external rectorate at a certain time, because politicians didn't think they could do the job, and there were lots of problems with the grading and with not having regulations and really being out of control in the view of politicians. And those were opportunities, but it's also I think lots of good things grew out of it, but also things that became, as we talk very much about today, polarization. It became difficult to have other opinions. And that's what we struggle for today, to be an open university, to be a free thinking place where you can have all kinds of opinion. It's the only way for us, because that's what we discussed from the beginning when I was a rector. What is critical thinking? It is letting space for the others. It is listening to other people's thinking. It is not burying the others' the ideas, but discussing them. It's openness.
So I'll allow myself a bit of disconnected question. Critical thinking and the influence of American universities, to me, sounds like almost an invitation to bring liberal arts early, which happened later across Europe, right? Yes. but it never made its way to Nordic countries in any defined shape or form. And I've been wondering for years where that is. I've heard some various answers, but none of them was completely satisfactory. So why PBL from McMaster? And why not with all the critical thinking, rhetoric, and student empowerment and exchanging ideas? And I think visible influence also of Anglo-Saxon universities like Oxbridge. So why not liberal arts?
Yeah. I think liberal arts is part of our thinking in Denmark, in the Nordic countries, and maybe very much in Denmark due to our rich tradition from the big thinker Grundtvig. If you probably know him from the Bildung, the thinking of building people or having them build themselves in the 19th century with the folks' high schools, where every young person from the countryside would go, or many would go, to cultivate themselves, to learn about the nation and nature and the community, and believe in themselves. And all this profound thinking has really formed the Danish thinking, the Danish culture, and the Danish schools. And in the 70s, very strongly, there was a tendency, the approach was to believe in the child, in the individual, and to believe that you have a right to think, you have a right to have an opinion, and you should learn to defend it. And that's what I think very strongly was the tradition up through the 70s, 80s, 90s. Then we begin to learn from quality assurance, from clear objectives, and from a new grading scale that would measure how much you would know about what was planned that you should know about. That was a very explicit way of, I think, leaving the liberal arts thinking that I would connect with Grundtvig and with the deep Bildung tradition in Denmark and in the Nordic countries.
So you've had it as essence, you've just never called it directly liberal arts, it sounds to me.
Yeah, it wasn't coded that way. And very often when you start collaborating, you don't use the same terms. That's why it's so important to bring people together at the level we're trying to do in Critical Edge Alliance, for example, or in the European collaboration around education. But I think it should be global these days, if it's possible.
Isak?
I have one very simple question about the history, and then I will move to education. But so the why was the university called Marxist?
I've studied it a lot. I was not there, but I've studied it a lot, and it was really, really strongly left-wing. And it was, and Marxism was, Marx was read in all the universities at that time. I know that from other people who studied in Aarhus or in Copenhagen. You had to read Marx, and you would even have a bigger chance to get a job if you were a Marxist. And Roskilde got that label of being read and Marxist. And the first rector, who was a social democrat, very distinguished person, was almost kicked out by the Marxists.
I see.
He was called terribly right-wing.
Even being social democrat. Okay. So moving to problem-oriented project-based learning. It's kind of a long term, but every word matters. It's we know that, and I guess that 50% of the time it's quite a lot. But today, when labor market requires specialized skills, especially in technology, forgive me, it's a very trivial question, and probably everyone asks this. How do you manage the balance? So in the end, okay, I hear that from many people that, okay, you've got these soft competences, like project management, research skills, etc. But what professional skills that will help you in technology rich environment to get a good job? If you compare, you have natural science school, a natural science program, and you can imagine that people in other places study, for example, chemistry or biology for all 6 semesters. So how would you compare disciplinary skills, specialized skills of your graduates with others?
I think, first of all, we do this very differently in different parts of the world. In Denmark, we have a tradition, and probably also in Germany, a tradition of studying very deeply one discipline.
Yeah.
In the US or in Italy or in other countries, you can change at least. In the US, you have this broad bachelor's program, and you can actually, on that, you can build a totally different career. It depends on you. It depends on what you study and how hard you study. So I think Roskilde has been very important to break that good circle of being very deeply disciplinary. But you need people who can cross the disciplines. You need people who can formulate new problems. Of course, you can do that in the discipline, but problems in the real world are not cannot be solved, at least, and not even formulated from one discipline. They often have many different sides. So these people, for example, from our science department, they are quite specialized still, I would say, but they often get jobs in industry where they build bridges between different parts of that industry. Sometimes they go into one discipline later, but they have this approach, and I wouldn't call it soft skills, because it's not just to learn the soft skills, it's actually to learn the hard skills that you're doing it. Problem-oriented work is just another kind of reading, of studying, and it's a way that motivates you to study hard. When you work with a problem you're really engaged in, it sticks to your brain better than if you learn a lot by heart in a whole semester, and you can say you learned it, but you may have forgotten it. Something you have really studied in a project that made sense, that had a context, according to lots of different pedagogical theories, you are actually learning more. But you cannot say this and this and this and this. And that's what McMaster University of Medicine, it was a medical school that started it. And even medical education, you see that nowadays. I think it's very important to stress that it's not just soft skills. It's really a way of studying the disciplines, or the interdisciplinary way of approaching a problem, but that's also through the disciplines. And we make our students aware of the disciplines. We're not trying to say that a method is just flying around. It comes from somewhere, and you need to know that.
Yeah, I guess it's, let me even repeat it, it's a very strong statement that we are talking about really hard skills, and problem-based learning is the best way to get really useful and deep disciplinary knowledge. So that's very good. But we all know that this approach requires quite strong pedagogical skills, because you have to moderate the discussion, etc. We all remember some of our professors who they were talking to the blackboard. They even show their back to the audience and just wrote something. So 2 questions here. Do you train your colleagues specifically, and do you think that any university can help their professors to become moderators or facilitators or supervisors of projects? And the second question about financial thing. As a rector, you probably worry about that. So is it cheaper or more expensive?
First of all, the question about if the training of the professors. Yes, it is both for the students and for the professors, the researchers. It's harder. So when I say that the results can be better, it demands that it works well, that people are really engaged and that the supervisors are well aware and that the work is being done. Therefore, we have training programs. We have every year for each professor at Roskilde University, 14 hours that they can train for themselves, take courses, build their training. But this is only built on first training programs for every associate professor. When you start as associate professor, you go through a training where you actually do a project together with your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And you also defend or present that project to the others and get feedback. And I always participate together with the deans in that presentation of the associate professors. It is fantastic. They're working with the methods of Roskilde University on the methods of Roskilde University. We learn so much. So that is a very important, how do you say, building stones that we build on. But then we continue that education both through seminars at the different departments, helping the researchers and the teachers can participate in courses. We have a unit that is specialized in our pedagogy and that helps the teachers and the heads of studies and everyone. So we do quite a lot. And we also have a foundation course for new students, especially for international students, so that they get an introduction to what we mean by PPL. And that's also why we have written, we have explicited the 7 principles. And we have also written a book that all new students get in English and in Danish, or at least they get in English or in Danish, a book on the group work and how they can tackle it and how understand it. And so, because if you don't know how to work with it, then I cannot say that it works that well.
Well, I want this book.
Yes.
Okay. So is it on the website?
You can find it on the website. Yes.
Okay. Good. I will.
And it's also you can also get it as an ebook, so you can.
Yeah.
You can get it.
So what is and again, let me remind the question about the cost.
I didn't forget because that is an important thing. Of course, it is more costly to have less students in the room with a professor or with an associate professor or assistant professor. That is our big challenge. We struggle to keep the 50%. We struggle to have groups not over 7 students. Some universities have changed that. But if we want it really to be the discussions the students have with the also the fact that the students can decide for themselves, the groups cannot be bigger. We struggle to have enough supervision during the semester and to keep the oral exam and have students understand what an important thing it is, because you see that in many universities. It's not just Roskilde that has that complains about resources for teaching and especially for teaching, because actually we get a lot of research resources from private foundations, but for teaching it is quite hard. So we really try to have our students get as much out of it as we possibly can. But I cannot say that it is not challenging. Fortunately, some of the private foundations are beginning to support the development of teaching, but otherwise it's always research. Private foundations, national foundations. In Denmark, we have quite good possibilities when it comes to research, but it's still more challenging when it's education.
I have several questions left. Isak, I think it was it your last one, or do you still have?
Yeah, it was my last question. Yeah.
So talking about education, as students, you said that there is an exam, even though you tried to do away with exams, but it didn't quite wasn't quite possible. Is student progress assessed individually or as a group now? And what is the distribution between that?
It's always individually. all grading in the Danish system is individual. And I think it is fair, even though when you work in a company, you are assessed more as a group when you have a project, when you show something. So it has been discussed at some point with industry. The group exam as such was actually abolished for 6 years or so. I think that is about 10 years ago. And it was then given back to us, to all the universities. We all use it to some extent. And it was quite hard for the students actually to relearn what is a group exam and how can I get a good grade when I should also look at my group members. That is a balance. It's good to learn actually. But I think group exams are working quite well now, and we spend enough time to be able to evaluate individually and give them both group and individual feedback. But again, Isak, that is costly, but it is also important. There are many exams in Danish universities now where it's difficult to get the feedback, and it's a big discussion in Denmark. Do we give them enough feedback, and how can we finance that? But our feedback is to the group, but it's the grades and some feedback is also individual. The other exams outside the project work, which is the rest of the semester, is individual, completely individual, also the exam form as such.
You also said that the problem-oriented project learning can be applied to research. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that the method is applicable across. How does that work?
It is the way you work with by formulating a problem, finding the right methods, doing the analysis, and and trying to conclude at the end is like a research report. And when you talk about research-based education, it has usually internationally many interpretations that often, when they are put together, it is really research-based education. And I would say that it is taught by researchers mainly. In Denmark, it's usually about 60–70% of the teachers who are researchers. Depends a little bit of the programs, more in natural science, less in social sciences, broadly speaking, in Denmark. That's one thing. And then the fact that you only use research-based material, and the fact that you use research methods when you work as a student. And that is a strong point for us at Roskilde, that we use research methods. We train our students to use research methods, not to become researchers necessarily, but to become good I would say good employees, good independent workers, employees in companies, in industry, in the public sector, or wherever, because you're able to actually find, look for truth, look for the right answers, be thorough in your methods, and not just take an answer from the internet or from some chatbot or anything. I think we need more than ever with artificial intelligence to teach our students to think for themselves. And that is what research-based methods or research methods can help them do. So I think the method is more important than ever, and that the 7 values or the 7 principles of our approach are principles we need to cultivate and to discuss. It's a challenging time we're living in also for education.
So we obviously have a lot of questions left still, but we are almost out of time. So we'll ask our traditional final question for the webinar. And we'll modify it for Rook, as we tend to do. Our traditional question is the advice for innovative university leaders, but Rook is not just an innovative university, it's also an experimental university that is looking to upgrade other institutions, other higher education systems, including by, as you said, biting, well, not you, but biting their legs. So the question goes, if we are talking about an experimental institution that doesn't just want to be excellent and to offer something different to students and faculty and other stakeholders, but also help other universities evolve, what advice would you give about the proper method of biting legs?
An advice to other universities about how to develop, is that?
Rather, how to develop other institutions. So how to help those who are looking at them advance.
Yeah.
So do you go to conferences? Do you publish books? What do you do? How do you speak?
I think that we have a lot of visitors coming to Roskilde University, and I also do sometimes webinars to discuss with colleagues at other universities how can they work with generally with development of what I would call university pedagogy, develop teaching, because there's not one method. We have one, but we want it to be fruitful and it has to you have to be able to interpret it differently at the university. I think that free critical thinking is really important, and listening to people. So when I talk to people, or when I give advice, I don't know if I can give advice, but because we are all different, but I try to take, you have to take the point of departure of where you are. That's also what politicians should do when they travel to learn from other countries. Remember where your roots are. Remember, you can take a lot of inspiration from something else, but you need to take it into account, to take it into your system. And I'm sure your researchers will also really be happy about that, if that you don't come with a new system and tell them that now we should have that other system, but to develop from where you are. And then you can be inspired by somebody who works in a totally different way. I have been very inspired by working in the Critical Edge Alliance, or just visiting other universities, or, as you said, going to conferences. Inspiration from other people, and very much people also, not necessarily an institution, but also it's fantastic researchers. So yeah, I don't have one answer, but I have the answer that you should take your own point of departure seriously.
Thank you. Definitely, this webinar is a part of your inspiration work. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
to you.
much.
Great pleasure.